While at last week's Energy Storage event at the Houses of Parliament, we spoke to Anthony Price, head of the Electricity Storage Network, who co-hosted the event. We asked what the organisation's immediate aims are and how they hope to achieve them.
What we wanted to do today was to bring the message of electricity storage right into the heart of government. We've got a complicated story to tell, but actually we can simplify it a lot. We've always needed storage in our systems. We wouldn't have a water supply if we didn't have water towers, we didn't have reservoirs, we didn't even have cisterns in the houses. And so we're quite used to the idea that we've got storage in a water system. We really need to get that idea home when we think about our electricity networks. And the issue here is one of how can we move our electricity networks from yesterday to tomorrow. So we brought together a number of speakers. Ben Wilson from UK Power Networks, he's Strategy Director for UKPN, and they're building what is currently the very large battery in the east of England, which is going to be used for levelling the load on a substation which otherwise would become overloaded. Now that might sound a bit obscure, but if you think about it this way, what he's doing is putting in a new system which would take about 18 months to put in. The alternative would have been to have gone for installing a new line into Leighton Buzzard. Now that line would have cost probably about the same amount of money, but could have taken 5 or 6 years to get permitted and built.
That's a transmission line.
A distribution line. But they've made some considerable cost savings in doing this, and what they're doing is testing out an alternative. That's one example. Rachel Ruffle from RES was talking about how we can use storage as a means of balancing the load and the demand and the supply from renewable generation. So that renewable generation varies, it goes up and down during the day. Putting it into storage and making storage work instead of using fossil fuel generation could save a lot of money. We could pass those savings on to the consumer. Mike Wilkes, Mike's an expert in electricity markets, and he was able to give us a comment on how storage compares with other technologies. So we put all of those together, and it was summed up by Lord Oxburgh. Lord Oxburgh is an acknowledged expert on climate change as well as on some of the engineering aspects of energy supply. And he expressed his concern that while we've got the technology right, we're not really making fast enough progress. So I think what we've been able to do today is to bring everything together and show that technically we can make progress. Commercially, we've got solutions which are valid in many parts of the world, but we just need to get the market right where we are now.
Something like energy storage, which crosses over from a kind of market-based solution into something that to some extent needs to be supported by government and overseen by policy. What are kind of good ways of bringing those interests of business interests and economic interests in with, say, national interest or even the bigger picture of climate change and that kind of thing? How can we sort of find those interests merging and finding a good solution?
Well, I think you've got to be at the heart of the problem here. What we have to try and do is to come up with a system which is sustainable, that means low carbon, low emissions, ideally gives low cost, and so therefore has system benefit. And Lord Oxburgh, if you remember, was talking a lot about the whole system, putting the whole system together. If we want to have investors making decisions and investing in technology, they need to have a secure income stream. If that income stream is not secure, because either they think the market is unstable, the market will change, or just because the value they're getting is so variable they can't bank it, then nothing will happen. If we can come up with a market solution which gives investors confidence that when they've invested their money, they can make a reasonable, but not necessarily excessive, a reasonable rate of return, that is something that enables technologies to go forward. And that's what we need to do with storage, because at the moment, storage doesn't really have an income stream that allows it to compete fairly against investments in other parts of the industry. And one of the comments which came up today was, we are in desperate need of new capacity. We could get new capacity by running a very expensive capacity market, building lots of gas-fired plant, or we could build storage. And actually, if we just spent a small portion of what we're prepared to invest in new gas-fired plant on storage, we could have a much better system.
Britain's Institution of Mechanical Engineering recently launched some assessment of energy storage technologies available to the UK, and the International Energy Agency's released a technology roadmap going forward for storage. How does the work of the electricity storage network kind of differentiate itself, or alternatively, how does it fit in with that bigger picture of energy storage assessment?
We've been looking at reports on electricity storage for, well, I've been looking at them for well over 15 years, and all of them have a common theme. It may not be their number one recommendation, but usually number 2 or number 3, it says unless there is market reform, electricity storage will not gain a commercial foothold. And what we've done is we've just been through those reports, some of the recent ones, and we just picked out their recommendations that have said we need market reform. If you haven't got the right commercial signals, electricity storage will not happen. And so we would reinforce recommendation number 2 from the Institution of Mechanical Engineers, for example, which says if government doesn't realise that they need to have market reform, storage just won't happen. So we're in total agreement with them. We're not arguing against them.